I talked with John Solomon, executive editor of the Washington Times today, about his newspaper's front story and how a move by Congress to cut off funding to ACORN has suddenly hit some legal hurdles. Your paper, Washington Times, has a story about ACORN, which so many of us have been following, not only about what happened with these young reporters exposing the organization for trying to, help them avoid taxes, paying, taxes, but also there's this move now underway in Congress to cut off funding to the organization. And your paper has a story today about how, surprisingly, it's facing some hurdles and unintended consequences. Tell us about this.
Yeah, there's a little clause in the Constitution that creates a big problem for where we're headed, and that is equal protection. If Congress is going to take action against anything or anyone, they can't single out an individual and make it unique to them. They have to do it in a way that it's evenly applied to everyone who would be in a similar circumstance. That's just a tenet of our Constitution and some wisdom our founding fathers had. But so they want to strip ACORN of the money. Everyone's in agreement with that, Republicans, Democrats. But you can't single them out in the Constitution. So you have to write it broad enough that it would pass the Equal Protection Clause. And specifically, that means if you're trying to strip ACORN because it defrauded America, it's acted terribly, you have to include a description that might encompass other contractors. And one of the big concerns is the language as it's currently written in the House bill would potentially bar major defense contractors who've had past problems with fraud or lawsuits or criminal convictions, as you often see in contracting. It may exclude them from future business. And so there's a big concern. If you can't have the McDonnell Douglases and the Boeings and the Northrop Grummans of the world, then this is going to be a problem for our Pentagon and Defense Department. So they're working on the language. I'm sure at some point they'll come to some bipartisan agreement. I don't think it's an issue of political will. They definitely want to strip ACORN. It's an issue of making sure that the I's and T's meet the true intentions of the Constitution.
Well, and I was reading where, ACORN has received, as I think your paper's pointing out, some $53 million from taxpayers since 1994. And I got to ask you, because now ACORN's saying it's going to sue this undercover team that exposed them. So what are they going to use? More taxpayers' dollars to do that?
Well, I think their taxpayer till is running dry pretty quickly.
Gosh.
As you know, the Census Bureau and the IRS recently announced that they're ending their relationships with them. I assume HUD will too. It's interesting, and my guess it's a political tactic, although if I'm on the other side of this, if I'm Andrew Breitbart or the filmmakers, I'm thinking a lawsuit could be really fun because I'll get discovery and I might learn some more stuff about ACORN. And so it may be a foolhardy thing to try to pursue a lawsuit right now. I think ACORN is a bewildered sort of organization, and it doesn't really know what it's doing. It's flopping around like a fish out of water. Some days it's apologetic. Some days it's angry that it was stung. But the one thing that's universally agreed upon, Republicans, Democrats, is that its days as a federal contractor appear to be numbered.
And it's hard to believe it's taken this long, and it's taken these young reporters, they don't even work for a network, to do what they did.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's probably the most interesting media story to come out of this. And it took a new media site, Andrew Breitbart's BigGovernment.com, and these two young filmmakers to expose what everyone in Washington seemed to know about. I mean, our newspaper wrote 20, 30 stories last year about problems with ACORN, whether everything from the Mickey Mouse voter registrations to questions about their conduct. And but the power of having an undercover film and the outrageousness of the script, the idea that an actor posing as a pimp and a prostitute could get ACORN workers to engage them so illegally, I guess is the word, certainly imprudently, has really shook the fiber of the country and brought the will finally to stop this flow of money. One of the most interesting things during the Clinton years, Bill Clinton was and the Republican Congress was really suspicious of ACORN, so they cut off funding to them quite a bit. And then it was during the Bush years, ironically, of all times, that this money began to flow back from HUD and IRS and census, and so it will now be under the Obama administration's watch, under a president who had some tangential connection to ACORN when he was a community organizer, that it will now be stripped again, and there is no loss of irony in that pendulum swing.
I got to ask you though, because I've been traveling quite a bit and haven't followed this as closely as I might have had I not been on the road and doing things, but even you look at the media coverage of what this young team exposed, it took a long time for them to even start talking about what they found out.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, one of the things when someone surfaces with a videotape on a website, it just comes out of nowhere like a lightning bolt. You as a journalist want to make sure you do due diligence. Was it edited? Was it a ruse? I mean, we've had many great media ruses, and so when the media jumps too quickly and gets suckered, we get criticized. When we jump too slowly, we get criticized. So one of the first things you have to do responsibly as a journalist organization, how were the tapes acquired? How do we know they're true? How do we know they weren't edited to make it look like something? Because in today's digital editing world, you can make it is. We figured out pretty quickly that, and we have a relationship with Andrew. He writes a weekly column for us in our newspaper. We were able to do due diligence ourselves pretty quickly, and get on the story within the first 24 hours when the tapes aired, and then continue writing it, reading it, and developing it to other places. I think that some of the other news media organizations, I think, just dismissed it as a stunt for a couple of days until it just became so huge and so dramatic and so interwoven into the American social fiber that you had to cover it. And I think some newspapers like the New York Times, Washington Post, others have talked about missing that story, being behind on it. And, I think there's some truth to that.
I got to ask you, since Andrew works with you guys, no hint of this coming up? Never mentioned it that they were doing this?
No, it was a lightning bolt to us as it was to everyone else. And, we had done a lot of reporting on ACORN, so the allegations didn't surprise us, but certainly the existence of undercover video was as surprising to us as anyone. And we were glad to jump on it and to develop it because it is an important issue. And taxpayers, I think, were rightfully angered by what they saw.
Oh, and my gosh, but you look at what your paper's talking about today and these hurdles that, keep popping up. No doubt ACORN's going to, fold. Would you say fold? There's no question.
I think that they're pretty stubborn. They're going to probably hang around. They're going to fight for survival. I do think the political will now exists in both parties to deny it federal funding, and that will change the nature of the organization significantly. If you're not on the till of the taxpayer, you're going to have to define your work. After all this controversy and the teenage prostitution angle and the pimp and all that, you probably are going to have a lot fewer donors in the private sector willing to support you too. So it probably becomes a shrunken ACORN. They certainly talk like a group that wants to stick around and revive itself and fix itself, as they've said. Whether that happens remains to be seen.
When you look at it, you just wonder, how can they fix, they make excuses even when they had employees pleading guilty of voter fraud.
Yeah, no, they're a scrappy organization, and they often talk from two different ends of the same sentence, and so you have to read carefully what they're saying. But they're going to be significantly diminished. Their credibility already is diminished. Obviously, their federal funding is going to be and is in the process of being diminished. And the question is, can it find a rightful place in its space to continue operating as a private sector? And that remains to be seen. They certainly are indicating that they're going to fight for that. We'll see if they can find the support to do it.
Yeah, like you said, they want to go to trial. They want to take these young people to trial. Boy, wouldn't that be something?
If I'm on the other side of this, I'm looking forward to discovery because there's a lot more questions we might want to ask ACORN.
And you got to wonder what else these young reporters have under their hat. They came out with one video. Who knew there were so many more to follow?
You're spot on. Who knows what else is left or what other documents that they might have gathered or encompassed. And so, that's why we're all digging and asking tough questions. And I'm not convinced that the $53 million number is all the money that's there. We're still digging, and we think the number might be a little higher. So we're doing some investigating on that to try to understand exactly how ACORN got its money. We know the money went directly to ACORN, but ACORN set up a series of third-party groups that would also collect the money in their name. So we've been going through federal contracts for actually weeks now. I guess it's a couple of weeks, trying to put together an exact dollar total because we suspect that the number may be a little larger than we think.
Yeah, it's really sad commentary, no doubt about it. All righty, thank you so much, and we'll be talking to you as the weeks ahead as we move forward on the election in Virginia because, boy, all eyes are on that one, too.
Absolutely. That's going to be a real bellwether for 2010.